YouTube, what is up? And hello to the comic book head community out there. Welcome to my video. I'm doing another and nearly last video on my treasury books, also called Grail books, things of that nature. Things that I really liked and I kind of separated from the rest of the books. Brought with me with the anticipation that they were good books to kind of keep separate and hopefully someday either sell or that they would go up in value. Kind of my idea of spec books. Anyway, where we left off last time was this one, which was Origin Wolverine book 4. And there were a couple that came on after this, but I stopped at 4. But anyway, that was where we ended. So the next book in there is, I'm sure everybody has some of these. I don't know if I won a bet or lost a bet. I don't know why this is in there, but I got to show humility and show it. Paula Abdul, Personality Comics. Actually, I think this is one of those things that, you know, if you go to a comic convention, you walk by and they're giving away and stuff like that. I think this is one of those. And for some reason, it ended up in the box. So I just figured I'd show it. We are in the piece, and we have Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, issue number 1. I have a couple copies of this book. I've talked about this one. I really like this. Again, the Tarantula was a kind of a good. I liked him. I mean, he was Spider-Man's equal back in the day. He always gave him a run for his money just because he had the agility and all that kind of stuff that Spider-Man had. But anyway, that's one, and this is issue 2. Issue 2 is a very cool Kraven story. Kraven and the Tarantula kind of team up to give Spidey a run for his money. And issue 6, which has Morbius in it. Again, a good book to kind of have if you have it in your collection. Keep an eye on it, with Morbius possibly getting his own show or maybe being in the next Spider-Man movie. We don't know, but again, keep an eye on this. My guess is it's probably going to do pretty well down the line. And then I do have a longer run of this, but those are the only books that I have of Peter Parker in this Grail box. Then I've got The Punisher. This was the first book from his limited series, the way Marvel usually did it. They did typically a 4-book run of a limited series and saw how it sold. And if it did well, then they would follow it up by a unlimited series, which is exactly what they did. This was the first book of the limited. And then they did a 4-book series, and then they started with the regular run, which is, this is the first issue of that. And I got a couple of these. Then I also, War Journal, which was, they came out with a bunch of Punisher stuff back in the 90s. War Journal, War Zone, etc. I didn't really like the direction that they took. Frank Castle, they really were having a hard time kind of defining him. And it seems like they've gotten a better, sort of a better idea of the character lately. So anyway, a lot of people have talked about this book, which is Rye, issue 0. I guess there's a few different types of this. There's a flat, there's a glossy cover, and a not. I believe there's a direct cover, etc. But again, this was always a very cool cover. It would always pop when you walk by a convention table or something like that because of the red dot. And then something kind of more along the lines of another joke book, Ren and Stimpy. This was one of the polybagged issues that had the little sticker in it, and that's the running joke. Is he said you ripped open the bag and now it's worthless, which was kind of the running joke back then. And I have the full run of Sandman. For some reason, I didn't take it back with me, back from my big collection, but I don't know why I started with this, but this is issue 20, let's see here, what is this? I think it's 29. no, 28. These were always real funky covers. They were always a combination of what looked like photographs and art and stuff like that. But this was a very big thing back in the 90s, Sandman. It was kind of the, I guess the equivalent now would be Saga, something like that. It was definitely had a indie vibe to it, even though it was a DC book. It still had an indie vibe to it. This is issue 30 and 31. I have a couple of those. 1 and 8, if I remember right, are the two issues to kind of keep an eye on. 1 was the original, obviously the first issue. 8, I think, was the Origin of Death. And if I remember right, there was a version of that that was super rare, almost like a error cover or something like that. That was very valuable. But again, I forgot the exact way that was set up. This is issue 33 and 34. And again, I don't know if you can see the covers. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they definitely had, again, they had sort of a photograph look to them, as well as traditional artwork and a bunch of stuff done with the lettering. 35. And again, I got a couple of those. And then they did a couple spin-offs. This was called the Sandman Orpheus. This was a first issue, and this was a glow-in-the-dark. I don't know if you can see, but there's a bunch of like white. There's a face built in here, kind of an effect. Anyway, this stuff all glows in the dark if you hold it up to light and then put it in a dark spot. The eyes and the mouth, and then what's the face and all that is all glow in the dark. I got a couple of those. Then we go into more S's. Silver Surfer, issue 17. I think that was my first old book that I ever collected. I think this I actually found or something like that. And then, so it's pretty beat up. And then I collected heavily in Spawn. And of course, I was collecting during the time when Image was formed. This was one of the, not the first, but one of the first books after Youngblood that Image did. And again, it was an interesting series. The only problem with it is it was heavily promoted, heavily sold, so there's all kinds of issues floating around, which unfortunately makes it, the value all not that great. Son of Satan, and I have a couple of those. And of course, the same story with Spider-Man, which was the Todd McFarlane takeoff of this, which is there's all kinds of X-Men, stuff like that. But then nonetheless, it was still an interesting book, interesting artwork. He put all kinds of little spiders in his artwork. That was kind of his thing. And I've shown this a few times. This is a kind of a special issue, special edition, which features Venom. Then I have a Dark Horse. Dark Horse was a fairly prominent company back then. Not so much now, unfortunately, but back then it was I guess back then it was sort of like how Image is now. It was an indie, primarily an indie publishing company, much smaller, but yet made made Preview magazine and stuff like that, so you could order a lot of their things. Then I also have a run of Strange Tales, which is again cool old stuff. 124, featuring everyone's favorite villain, Paste Pot Pete, which was, I don't know, again, who was smoking what to come up with that guy. 129 and 135. And then I have a couple of these. Submariner #1. This one's in kind of rough shape, but I have a much cleaner one that's getting pressed and off to get graded after that. Then another Submariner, which was number 40. Then this is the issue that everybody knew about. This is an issue that I bet I sold, I'm not joking, 100 copies of, um, which was The Death of Superman. Once again, everybody thought this book was going to, because they thought Superman was going to stay dead. This was one of those books that people that weren't collectors, people that were just investors, and people that it was, I mean, it made newspaper, it made the news, it made Entertainment Tonight that Superman died, and for that reason, it trended. And it wasn't called trending back then. It just got to be, everybody knew about it and was talking about it, and everybody had to have a copy of this, thinking that Superman was going to stay dead, and the issue was going to, make them lots and lots and lots of money. Never did happen. But I sold, like I said, probably 100 copies of this book for $25 a pop, which, I had a bunch and I wanted to unload them quickly. I did, and to be honest, the people got a pretty good deal. I mean, they probably right now are still at about the same price, so, they didn't get rich, but they didn't lose their butt either. And then I have a run of Tales of Suspense. Not in great shape, but still old books, old 12 centers. Issue 83 and 84, 85. That's a very cool Iron Man cover. 86, 87, and 88, 89, 91, 93, and then it jumped from Tales of Suspense. I collected a few Tales to Astonish. Let's see. This was more along the lines of Power Man or the Wasp, and Ant-Man, stuff like that. This was 54, 62, 66, 67. Love that pose for the Hulk, man. That's just, that's so, how Spider-Man has his signature poses, that's a signature Hulk pose. 68, 76, 80. Jump now to Submariner and the Hulk instead of Giant Man and Hulk. And then a Unity book, which is one of the gold special books, which is with the gold logo up here, which is Unity. I believe this was one of the sendaways, so if you collected all the coupons and a few different books, cut them out, send them out, this is what you got. Then we jump to Web of Spider-Man, and again I'm going to, this is a book dealing with Venom before he became Venom, the black costume of Spidey's, so this is a good book kind of to keep an eye on, as well as this one. And I think I've talked about that before, which is Web number 18. And then Wolverine Run, and once again it started out, I've got two of these. I've got one signed, which I'll show in my next video, and then I'm going to show my signed books in my next video. This is issue 1. And then this was actually when the series started. This is when it was in its limited. So this was the first, there's 4 of these. This is the first one. The second one I think I've shown before. It's him jumping. And then there's 3 and 4, and then it started with its own series, which is running still today. And then this was a big issue back then. Not so much now, but this was the first time that Sabretooth and Wolverine had a fight, fought one another. And the idea back then was that was his father. Sabretooth was Logan's father, so of course it was kind of a, they played around a lot with Wolverine's memories, and backstory and history and things like that. So the idea was that this was his father. So, that was a big issue back then, if it was truly a fight that they had. I have a couple of those. Then, so anytime there were Wolverine and similar to Hulk and Thing fights, whenever there was Wolverine and Sabretooth, it was always kind of like a big issue. That's 43, 44. And here we go with the Wolverine Sabretooth appearance, 45. And that's why I got a couple of these. And then that storyline going into 46. Same thing. Got a couple. With the idea being that it was going to be a big book. Have 4 of those. And then it jumps to number 100, which was it was kind of a 3D looking thing. One shows Wolverine stuck in chains, and then the other one shows his skeleton, like if the flesh was all gone on his bones. Once again, getting back to Dark Horse, they released this, a bunch of their own little superheroes. This is X. Then I've got some X Factors, which was issue 1 and 5. And I should have probably, again, I wasn't back on the ball when the movie came out, but if I would have had this done over, I would have probably gotten this issue sold. This issue went through the roof when the movie was coming out, and then it didn't get such great reviews, so it tanked kind of. And this is issue 6, which was the first. This guy, I'm spacing out on his name, but then this one, which was 15, and this was kind of a cool cover because this is where the Angel went from being kind of this cool guy to just mellow to Archangel, which is, if you remember in the movie, they tore out his feathers and it got replaced with metal and all that kind of stuff, and that he became a much darker character. And that's kind of what this little thing means with the thing around it. And the person I'm thinking about, by the way, is Apocalypse. Sorry about that. And anyway, so he becomes him. This is him before Apocalypse, and this is him after. That's how he looked in the comic books. That's issue 24. 63, which, if I remember right, I think there's Baby Cable in this. I'm not sure. I know there's something important about this issue, and this could be the one that's Baby Cable. I'm not sure. Then X-Force, and I've shown this book, but this is just one of the books I've had here. I know I've brought more of them. That's issue 2. And this is 15 with a Deadpool appearance. And then, other than my Hulk 181, this is probably my second most Grail issue that I own, which is Giant Size 1, which is the first appearance of the new team, the current team, if you will, of X-Men. Before that, it was just, it was kind of Jean Grey and a mellower group. This is a much more, I guess, modern takeoff of the X-Men. And again, this was a big issue, a very difficult issue to keep in good condition because it was a squared off spine. And if you read it and put any sort of, if you read it and turned it back or whatever, it jacked the spine really bad. So this is a tough book to find in really high grade. Also, being white, it tended to get dirty quickly. This one actually could probably use a little bit of a dry cleaning. This is issue number 4, which is an annual. And then I also have annual 11. And then an old X-Men, which is issue 42. And this was the X-Men before they became the modern version. But I was talking about Jean Grey, Iceman, the Angel, Beast, and Cyclops. And then 54. And that one's in pretty good condition, actually. I may have that one graded. 93, and if memory serves me right, this was the first issue of the, or the last issue of the old team. So after this, I believe there was a pause, and then it started up with issue, I'm not sure, I think they reprinted for a while, and then they went into issue 100, which was the new team. Or I could be wrong, it could have been 94 on was the new team, but it was something like that. 248. And then, of course, a lot of people have talked about this book, First Gambit, which is 266. I have a couple of these. This was, again, a very, very hot book. I've got a newsstand and a direct copy. Be interesting to see what they do with Gambit. Gambit was on his way to be a very, very big character. He was sort of like, you know, getting Wolverine status almost, but it seems to have kind of subsided a little bit in popularity. And then I have a bunch of these, which was the first cameo of Bishop. I think some people, Market Watch explained that the one you really want is 283, which is the actual full appearance of Bishop. 282, even though they have him on the cover, it's more along the lines of a cameo. And do keep in mind, I believe both 282 and 283 have first and second prints. The second print is just different lettering, so make sure and watch for that. Don't let somebody sell you one and tell you it's the other or vice versa. And this was one of those books that, again, I invested sort of heavily in. Really haven't gotten around to selling them or anything like that, but we'll see. And that's it, guys. I do appreciate you watching. Look forward to your comments. And the next issue will be kind of strange books, oversized books. I know I've showed a couple of them. I have some old 12 centers that don't even fit in the regular size boards and bags. And also have a bunch of signed books that I got. I lived very close to Golden Apple Comics, which is a big comic book shop in Los Angeles, and they would have signings there, stand in line, do the whole thing, sort of like what happens when they release an iPhone now today, and you stood in line and got the certificate or an armband, and then you came back and got back in line based on the number you got, and then you went through a signing and could get stuff paid. You'd bought a book and had it signed and all that kind of stuff, so that'll be next issue. Thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Look forward to all your guys' stuff. Again, been a big fan of a lot of creator stuff, looking at your books. And that's it. Y'all take care and talk to you later.